Hey everyone, in this video I will be discussing what I believe should be done in Cage 3 to make the game as fun as possible for all types of players. There are some pretty noticeable game mechanic mistakes made in recent Cage games that hold them back from being more fun, so allow me to divulge these concerns since some of them might not be obvious until you sit down and think about them. The first concern of mine that I would like to discuss is actually rather important. This is a problem that exists in many games unfortunately, and that is the issue of balance. What does this mean? Well, to simplify it, a game like Cage with good balancing will prevent you from being able to spam a single go-to strategy to win all your fights for you. To come up with a relatable example, the worst offender of this is Cage DDD. To the players who are smart enough to explore all the commands in the game likely came across the command known as Balloon. As it turns out, the Balloon command is ridiculously overpowered by the game's mechanics. Balloon can stagger easily, it hits extremely hard, especially with some Dream Eater's abilities active such as Spear Roar, and it can also be spammed due to low cooldown times on it. This is considered horrifically bad balancing because Balloon is the best option for every fight in the game, so using anything else is handicapping yourself. And just to clarify, Balloonra and Balloonga are even better and just as easy to get. Some people may try to counter this and say just don't use Balloon, but there really is no reason not to if the game allows you to unlock this ability, rather easily might I add, and allows you to spam it within the game's mechanics just fine. If the game was balanced well, you wouldn't have to have this Code of Honor conundrum, but instead would have more fair ways of dealing with fights by default. BBS has a similar problem where there are a few easy to get strong commands, which are the Surges, Mind Moves, and Ignite, or if you're with mob fights, Magnet commands are ridiculous. With all of those, you pretty much trash every fight, so using the game's plethora of commands is not really wise, even early game, compared to just a very small pool of easily accessible strong commands that would fill your deck instead if you wanted to play smart and win easily. Meanwhile, the rarer commands are not safe to use in fights due to recovery time being too slow and no invincibility frames at all. A well-balanced battle system is important to having diverse gameplay, and since Cage 3 boasts many different battle options, it would be a shame if, say, attraction flow attacks were spammable and ridiculous strong, because then that would be the go-to attack to spam to easily win fights, removing a lot of the challenge and learning experience of the game. Even 2FM isn't exempt from balance problems, and while 2FM greatly improved the game's balance from Cage 2 Original, it still had some issues, such as Reflect being incredibly strong and not using up much MP. Although what 2FM did that others did not is give you these great options late in the game for optional content instead, where spamming it won't fully benefit you like it would in the handheld Cage games. For example, Reflect isn't obtained until late game, and the base Reflect spell being spammed isn't going to get you too far due to its weaknesses. So hopefully the dev team puts great priority on balancing the game mechanics, especially with how many options we may have per fight in Cage 3. This next concern is one which worries me greatly as of late in Cage games. In Cage 2FM there's what we call the revenge value system. This was extremely well implemented into Cage 2 to prevent you from infinite comboing bosses to death, and while sometimes it doesn't quite do its job if abused specifically on some bosses, it generally works out rather well and made perfect sense. What is so great about it is that it teaches the player to be careful with their combos and not just mash away on higher difficulties or they get countered and killed. But even better is that there is consistency to your combos in Cage 2 on bosses, unlike in games like BBS where you get hit randomly for trying to do a combo, which is a bit of a problem in a combat system based heavily on the concept of being able to combo. To expand upon this, the other major issue combined with this is having bosses that do not stagger at all. Typically in Cage games, large enemies don't stagger, and that can make sense, but the handheld Cage games sort of remove the ability to properly stagger bosses in favor of randomly having them either not get staggered or breaking out mid-combo for no other reason other than they can. The problem with this is it punishes you for learning the fight. Take Vanitas for example. Those of us that spend a lot of time with BBS consider Vanitas one of the worst designed fights in the entire series because he can break out of any hit at random. There is no rhyme or reason for it, he just does. So if you want to use a full combo in this game, you may want to think twice and just stick to spamming a command like Mind Square or the Surges instead. I cannot reiterate how lazy it is to create bosses that don't stagger. It worries me because we went from a very well thought out revenge value system to a system where they just made bosses have super armor most of the time even if they're not attacking, or they also give them the ability to break out of a combo at random. Cage 1 and 2 are built upon the idea of dodging and countering, and my hope is that they follow the trend in Cage 3 and ditch the non-staggering boss design from the handhelds that punish players who spend a lot of time learning the game mechanics of a fight. So now I can talk a little bit about what I mean by good dodging. In Cage 2FM you have what is called growth abilities, and when these were properly leveled up they were able to be utilized rather well to dodge enemy attacks when timed correctly. you were not able to spam them to dodge attacks for free. Even a combo move using Reflex needed timing to avoid getting hit out of it on some boss or mob fights. So then we move on to BBS, and they give all three characters only one main dodge move. For Terra it was Slide, Ven had Dodge Roll, and Aqua had Cartwheel. When Ven and Aqua's dodge was max level, it had full invincibility frames. And that's fine, however, the dodge itself has no startup or cooldown lag. This meant if you mash your max level dodges with Aqua and Ven, you were fully invincible until you stopped mashing. I don't think I have to go in depth on why this is broken and ruins the point of dodging. What's worse is BBS created some optional bosses that nearly require spamming dodge due to their attacks sometimes coming out way faster than you can react to. I'm not sure what Square was ultimately trying to accomplish in a game like BBS with their dodging system, but it is a system I hope doesn't carry on to Cage 3 at all. Because of the way the BBS dodge system works, a character like Terra that actually has proper ending lag on his dodge gets curb stomped by those optional bosses at random out of his control just because the boss decided to do another move that snagged Terra during his dodge's cooldown time. You should be punished for timing a dodge wrong and have proper cooldown in between dodges to not allow chaining invincibility. 2FM had some scenarios where you could potentially chain invincibility together, such as limits and elixirs, but items were capped per fight, so eventually that strat wouldn't work out unless you were incredibly strong already. While in a game like BBS, you just mash out the square button to fully be invincible constantly. So let's hope this is worked on greatly to complement a dodge and counter system that Cage 1 and Cage 2 initially implemented, instead of mash square hard until you get maybe an opening without having to worry about timing the dodges. At this point in the video, it probably looks like I'm just trashing the mechanics of the handheld Cage games with no remorse in comparison to 2FM. However, let's now talk about fun movement. In 2FM, having growth abilities maxed out on Sora led to some pretty interesting movement options not just in fights but on the field. Sometimes this movement even had some unusual side effects that made you feel awesome for pulling it off. BBS took all of this fun away and threw it in the garbage for slow dodging movement, which led to pretty boring map exploring. On the plus side, they did it pretty well in DDD with Flowmotion. I'm not going to sit here and talk about the battle mechanic problems of it right now, but it sure was fun as hell using Flowmotion to nearly fly around maps, not to mention Sora gets Super Glide anyway, so combining that with Flowmotion made exploring fun in DDD. The good news is at this point we have confirmed Flowmotion in Cage 3, but we don't know the extent of which Sora can actually move around the areas other than slight hints at interactions with the environment and some Flowmotion on a wall. I have a huge issue with the way physical combos are done in BBS and DDD. Physical combos are basically obsoleted in favor of the command deck system. I won't go into why this is bad in this video, but perhaps in a future one instead, but I will say that I really hope that doesn't follow suit in Cage 3 as well. In Cage 2FM, once again we had many strong options per fight such as physical combos, magic, drive forms, limits, etc. In BBS there were many options you could do in fights, but one option was usually not to physically combo. And this is because not only did 2 out of the 3 playable characters have bad physical strength, but commands were just too strong to ignore. I don't want Cage 3 to go the route of using everything except physical combos, and I also don't want physical combos to be the only way to be strong either. In 2FM you are given a bunch of combo modifier abilities throughout the game that can lead to some pretty interesting combos you can pull off, such as the following example with inputs. And then we go to BBS, and this is about as exciting as a physical combo can be. To wrap up this segment, I'm just hoping the fun of combos is brought back into the series. This will be short. Flowmotion was really cool to move around with, but it had some huge noticeable flaws with its mechanics. The biggest obvious problem that Flowmotion has is that it is triggered accidentally way too often. If you were to dodge roll into a wall or object, you would initiate Flowmotion, leaving you wide open, which is the exact opposite of what dodge roll is trying to accomplish. The other problem with Flowmotion is that you're wide open even while executing a move, meaning on higher difficulties you would likely just be using Flowmotion and dying at random if an enemy attacks you during it. I'm not going to be going into the specifics, but all I will end this segment with is saying that with Flowmotion being confirmed in Cage 3, I really hope they fix the accidental Flowmotion usage problem, as well as find some balance between making you somewhat invincible during Flowmotion, but also not making it a strong, spammable option to auto-win fights, although in DDD's case, Balloon was always the better option anyway. That about wraps up my concerns with Cage 3 or even future Cage games. I know personally I would not enjoy playing new Cage games if they don't avoid some of the bad mechanics of the handhelds, and that if enough time and effort is put into game design, it shouldn't be too difficult to create a game with decently solid game mechanics such as 2FM, so let's hope for the best. Cage games may be well known for their story being a reason to play it, but if the gameplay is boring and spammy, then it raises the question of why I would buy the game instead of just watch someone else upload the cutscenes. That concludes this video, thanks for watching.